Joining us on the phone this morning, we're going to talk live with Dr. Chuck Williams in Philadelphia with Drexel University.
A large focus of his work is the prevention of violence, and with violence so much in the news right now, we thought that'd be a good conversation. Good morning and welcome back. Thanks for talking to us again, Doctor.
Thanks for having me on again, Paul and Bethany.
And I'm sorry, this is the reason we've got you back, the tragedy on Monday. What was your reaction when you heard? And just talk to us in general about the climate of America and violence.
I think that, like many of us who watched this tragedy, this unconscionable, horrific event, it was sort of like, not again. Like, are you serious again? A crazed gunman takes out the innocent, media frenzy, President Obama forced to pivot from speaking about economic issues to this mass shooting, which we would expect. He looked very frustrated. And it's just like, what do we need to do to prevent this from happening again? It's just, I think we're all getting sick and tired of it, even myself as a mental health professional. It's like, we have to figure out a way to prevent this, and I think that we can.
Well, with that said, do you feel like the American public is just becoming numb, desensitized to hearing yet another report, as you said, of this nature?
Interesting. In preparing to do this interview, I posted some questions on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and I actually got some feedback from some colleagues and friends of mine who said, you know what, I am tuned out to a certain extent. I'm sick of hearing about it. You know, from a psychological perspective, that could be something called avoidance, which, by the way, can be healthy. It's a way to prevent the psychologically harmful and damaging effects of experiencing, witnessing, or being exposed to a traumatic event. So in a way, we're protecting ourselves by saying, you know what, I don't want to touch that again. It's already been Sandy Hook. We've already had, you know, the Dark Knight shooter. And you can go on. In the last 24 months, there's obviously been an uptick in mass shootings in America, and we got to figure out why and get a handle on it.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned a moment ago, Doctor, the media frenzy. And as somebody who works in the media, I wholeheartedly agree. It becomes a media frenzy. When you look at the statistics over the last 40 years, you know, these mass random acts of violence have actually been pretty steady over the decades, but we now have a media culture where we pounce on it. And the other day I was talking to somebody who was about 30 years old, and I said to them, you know, your odds of being murdered with a gun are half of what they were now than when you were born. We don't get any of the positive trends about violence in this country out.
Right, and you're right about that. There is an overall sense that on some of the important numbers we're seeing a decrease, but the reality is, and I'm talking about a recent report that was done in the New York Times, there has been a slight uptick in some violent crimes. So we have to be careful about that. And while the average person may not be in harm's way, remember this, it is the second leading cause of death of 15 and 24-year-olds, homicide, murders. It's the leading cause of death of African Americans. It's the second leading cause of death of Latinos and the third leading cause of death of Native Americans and Pacific Islanders. So to some communities and in some regions around this country, it is more than about random shootings, but it's about a culture of violence which they confront every day. And this other last point that I want to make about the psychological aspect of this, which is damaging, you talked about the media frenzy. The media, they're not always helpful. You know how it is. You work in the business. I comment from time to time. Ratings, headlines, what's sort of sensationalistic, but not really drilling down to why we have these problems and how we can protect ourselves and each other. You know, what are the warning signs that someone may be in distress and may be prepared to act out? I don't know if we get a lot of that from the media. We get like debates about gun control, Republican, Democrat, and it really goes nowhere. I wrote on a blog post not too long ago when Sandy Hook happened, I said, you know what? You know, there's going to be this fight for gun control between the NRA and the Democrats. Vice President Biden said what he had to say. Barack Obama said what he had to say, the president. And then you had Speaker Boehner say what he had to say. And never the two shall meet. So here we have this age-old fight for decades that really doesn't allow us to think about innovative ways to prevent violence at large from taking the lives of so many innocent Americans every day.
Well, and Doctor, another complaint I'll make about my own industry is we never give enough time to talk about these serious issues. Our time is up, and
right.
You know, we could sit here for half an hour and maybe make a little progress, but we're all done. I look forward to talking to you again, sir.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you. 621 at 5.